Okay, we are recording.
Okay, we'll call our meeting to order. Let the minutes reflect those who are here as managers. Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Winan?
Present.
Manager Bradley?
Here.
Manager Wageman?
Here.
And Manager Priner here. The next thing we want to do is set the agenda. Is there anybody who'd like to add or correct the agenda today? Hearing none.
Nasty.
Is now exiting.
Hearing none, I am going to ask that an item be placed on the agenda. And it's going to be a verbal complaint against one of our managers. And I will have it in writing by Friday. And so I'd like to call a special meeting for Monday for the whole board to discuss it. Everybody okay with that? Any other comments on any other setting of the agenda? So we'll go to the approval of the minutes. Oh, first of all, we have to need a motion to set the agenda.
Madam President, this is Bradley. I move the agenda as proposed along with your amendment.
Okay.
Manager Wagaman, second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
President Priner,
Yes.
I would ask for a little bit of guidance from council. And I note that you didn't necessarily pick a spot on the agenda. I would imagine it's maybe action item 5 or something like that, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter, but that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay. So it'll be action 5. And we have a motion and a second. We'll call the vote. Waller?
Oh, yes.
Winan?
Yes.
Bradley?
Yes.
Wageman?
Yes.
And Priner, yes. Okay, the approval of the minutes.
Madam Chair, I would approve the minutes of October 12th, 2020 workshop. And you want to do these in 2 different
Yeah,
motions?
we'll do 2 different motions.
Okay.
Even nasty.
Is now joining.
Manager Wagaman, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We'll do a roll call. Waller?
Yes.
Winan?
Yes.
Bradley?
Yes.
Wageman?
Yes.
And Priner, yes. Motion passes.
Madam Chair, I would move to approve the Rice Creek Watershed District meeting on minutes of the meeting of October 14th, 2020.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call. Waller?
Yes.
Winan?
Yes.
Bradley?
Yes.
Wageman?
Yes.
And Priner. Yes, motion passes. Next thing is the consent agenda. Is there anything on the item that we need to open up and discuss, or we can just have a motion? Need a motion?
Madam President, this is Bradley. I would move that we cap rock item 17-118 on the consent agenda in accordance with the Rice Creek Watershed District Engineers findings and recommendations dated October 21, 2020.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Winan?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wageman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Open mic. Is there anybody in the audience that'd like to make any comments today? And that goes, before I say this too, Teresa, do we need to do a roll call on the people that are in audience, or is there nobody there today?
There are participants.
Okay, do you want to have them identify themselves, please?
Yes, please. Mr. Robert Jensen, is it?
Just Rob, you're muted.
You're on mute. You're still on mute.
That's okay.
Sir, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Now you're okay.
Good. I'm sorry. I haven't used this before.
No problem. Anybody else to identify themselves?
Stephen Massey. I'm working with Rob Jensen.
Okay, very good. Anybody else out there?
We have one on the phone, which
That's
ends in 20.
Mr. Masty. That's Mr.
That's
Masty.
Mr. Massey.
Okay, okay.
Okay, with that, we'll go back to our original schedule here. We have open mic. Is there anybody to make public comment to any issue that's not on our agenda today?
Yeah, that would be okay if Rob and I start.
I think, do we want to go down on that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we will
Okay.
go ahead.
Good morning,
Make
board.
sure to state your
and
name and
staff.
address for the record.
My name is Stephen Massey. I'm a landscape architect. I've been working with Rob and Jane Jensen at 99 Delwood Avenue on an issue related to a wetland as well as a lakeshore issue where there also is a pedestrian easement. So what we wanted to do is give a little history of where we've been, and I know that we've sent in.
Would everybody please shut off their microphones and they're not speaking right now?
I know we sent a few photos in, so we wanted to kind of give a quick background of kind of where we've been and what's led to this point, and then jump into how we can all maybe productively work together to help this issue. So I don't know if somebody is on. Is it Nick, or is there somebody else that has the photos that we sent in over the last few days?
President Kreiner,
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Mr. Mastian did supply some photos. Those are the ones that I did forward to the managers via email. I believe they were presented to Manager Waller this morning. I'll note that Mr. Masty has asked us to show those perhaps, and Patrick Hughes, I believe, has them available. Thank you.
Okay, continue.
Okay, so are we able to see those on the screen for everybody, or who's going to be managing that? Is that something Patrick's going to pull up?
Patrick is supposed to pull them up.
Yeah, Stephen. Yeah, this is Patrick Hughes. Certainly there's a number of photos that were shared. I don't know if you have specific ones you'd like to individually call out to be shared. I can't share them all at once, unfortunately.
No, why don't you just scroll through them? I don't want to spend a lot of time on here, but I think it's easy to get a quick visual of the space that we're discussing and where the wetland is, and then we can kind of understand what the disturbances that we're looking at and the restoration that you and I have talked about earlier this week, and we've been working on with your staff. So if you want to just scroll through them quickly, maybe that would be the best way to approach this to save time.
I don't know that I can necessarily scroll, but I can share individually here and there.
So what we're seeing, maybe I'll just moderate, Patrick. You just go ahead and keep clicking through them. What we're seeing here is we have an area where we've got a portion of the Jensen's property that also has a pedestrian easement. The easement holder has access from the street to the lake. This pedestrian easement has now been used more as a four-wheeler and a 6x6 four-wheeler access point on a regular basis, which has not allowed this wetland area, which is delineated by both parties and agreed to where this resource is, to heal or to function as a wetland from our point, because there's this continual disturbance. The Watershed District issued an action in 2017 that allowed them to, or they thought allowed them to put in a dock within this same space, but they failed to look at the other regulations, namely the other agencies involved that they also needed permission from, and namely the city of Delwood has a structure setback within 20 feet of the property line, which they were in violation of. So they installed this boardwalk and or dock system, and then the city of Delwood basically made them remove it because it was in violation of a city ordinance. In the process of doing that, they've taken this area and disturbed it to a great degree that's now devoid of vegetation. We have mobile soils that make their way freely into White Bear Lake. Essentially, what we're looking for here is there was an action by Rice Creek to allow them to put this boardwalk in. Again, notwithstanding that they needed to check with all the rules and regulations of all the other agencies involved, which the easement holder failed to do. But as part of that action, they also needed to restore the space once that boardwalk was put in. Now that they realized, or now we all realize the boardwalk can't be there and had to be removed, what we're asking for is to work with the Watershed District, and we've been working closely with staff as of late, as well as Ben Meyer from Bowser, to create a basically a written order that would direct the easement holders to complete what was issued to them in 2017, which was to restore the area that they disturbed as part of this boardwalk project. So I think, and what you're seeing there is some of the trees that were taken down. So one issue, irregardless of, the boardwalk, because the boardwalk was removed, they've continued to devegetate the entire easement area, some of which is wetland area, some of which is not, some of which is shoreline area, some of which is not. Most of this easement is wetland. There's a small portion as you make your way to the lake that's lawn, and then you have shoreline as well that has a little sliver of wetland along that as well. So some of the pictures that Patrick just scrolled through showcases, trees that remove vegetation, and just really the denuding of the entire landscape, and the lack of any sort of restoration process and/or initiative, which has allowed them to just openly use this wetland as kind of a mud bath continuously whenever they like, and we're asking for help to have the Watershed District complete the action that was given to them, which was to also restore the space when they were given permission to the boardwalk in. So Dr. Rob is also on here as well. Rob, is there anything you'd like to add to this before we turn this over to the team or the Watershed District?
Well, no, the Rindelots have been very aggressive and have proceeded to do whatever they want, regardless of the adverse impacts on the neighbors and the wetland and water going into the lake. They're driving the vehicles on our property. To do that, they've driven on State Highway 244, and it's against state highway law to drive ATVs or golf carts on a state highway, and it's also against Delwood city ordinances to drive golf carts on any streets in the city. So they've first place, just getting the vehicle there, they're breaking the law, and they're disrupting far more wetland area than is legally allowed on the designated wetland. One of the photos that you didn't show, they cut down a large pine tree that we like next to the lake this year so that they could winch. They've got a huge wakeboard. They have a 24-foot wakeboard, and they have a lift that's 27 feet long and 15 feet high, and it's 13 feet wide at the base. And so they trespassed off our property, and they use a large silver maple tree outside of the easement to winch the boat or winch the lift up, but they cut down that tree. Their storage on our property is prohibited by Delwood city ordinances. We this week went around, we live on a curved bay, and there are 12 homes that have a clear view of our lakeshore yard. And I got signatures from the 20 people that own these homes, and they're all in unanimous agreement that they want the ordinances enforced. Unless you own and reside on the lakeshore property, you're not permitted to store docks or lifts or other property on the shoreline unless you own the property, which they don't, and unless you reside on our property, which they don't. So that tree did not obstruct their access to the lake, but they, without our knowledge or consent, they cut the tree down and then proceeded to store their stuff. We've written to them the last 3 years explaining that they aren't allowed to store their stuff on our property, and yet they do that anyway. And the neighbors have felt that since they've started doing that, our yard looks like a boat storage place. It is really overcluttered, and that's upset our neighbors. Anyway, but to remove that large tree, they then drove the ATV again 3 weeks ago and really rutted up the easement again, and to haul away all the wood from that tree. That was a nice big, it was about 35, 40 feet tall. And yeah, it's just, so they're really aggressive. They just do whatever they want unless they're made to stop. We'd really like to have the Watershed District advise the Rindelobs that driving their vehicles over the wetland is more destructive than is permitted. And it's illegal for them to drive over the highway anyway. So we want some help because we need some relief. And
Thank you, Doctor. I
yeah.
have just a quick point I want to add to that. And you guys can correct me, but I believe it was a no loss determination that was issued by Rice Creek Watershed District in 2017 that said if the boardwalk that went in, there would be no loss as far as the wetland function and use, which of course the Jensens and our team disagree with. It's a shady area to begin with, and by putting that boardwalk or right above the wetland, it doesn't really allow it to function. So there's that issue. Additionally, there was no permission from the property owner. So the Jensens were not aware that this action was being taken on their property and was issued by the Rice Creek Watershed District. As a way to provide further clarity, because when I was brought on in early 2018, I said, let's help provide clarity to define where the wetland is. So part of that, part of the work that we have done with our team is since the no loss determination was issued in 2017 by Rice Creek Watershed District, we have gone through the wetland delineation process with Rice Creek Watershed District and all the other agencies, and have now established that there is a wetland resource there and have clearly defined the boundaries, and both the pedestrian easement holder and the landowners, the Jensens, all agree where that line is. So I think I think that's probably enough said there. Like Dr. Rob said, we'd love to have your help in protecting this resource, both the wetland and as well as the surface water of White Bear Lake. There's about an 8-inch pipe that discharges the water from this wetland the last 100-some feet. And what we're seeing is routinely is when we have rainfall events, or even with just the steady flow of water, which there's intermittent flow there at any point in time, there's a plume of pollution that is entering just below the surface of White Bear Lake along the shoreline where this pipe is. So that's kind of where we've got this point source pollutant that is directly polluting the lake. What it is, we'd like to have that wetland stabilized, and we'd love help from Rice Creek Watershed District to require the applicant, the Rindelobs, the pedestrian easement holders, to finish the project that they started and actually restore the area. And then once it's restored, respect what has been restored. So that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Okay, Nick, do you want to follow through on this, or was it Kyle that received the letter? Or
President Preiner, Kyle did receive the initial communication, but Patrick and the rest of staff are well aware of the site.
Okay.
Patrick, I think, could speak to the district's efforts.
Yes,
Okay.
thanks, Nick. Yeah, President Preiner, Board of Managers. I want to thank Stephen and Rob for their comments today. Certainly a lot of history on the site, and staff is aware of the situation and has been involved since at least 2017. Like was mentioned there, we did issue a no loss determination in 2017 that did allow for some work within this wetland in the easement area, vegetation removal, those sorts of things that do meet the criteria of WAC and no loss. There was also mention of a boardwalk that has since been found to be troublesome with city ordinance and things like that. So that's, maybe not something that's being considered at this time. As part of that no loss decision and WACA rule, it does talk about appropriate erosion and sediment control measures. So certainly we do see that there is some exposed soil out there today and those sorts of things. So staff has, visited the site a number of times over the years. Most recently, I was out there with Ben Meyer from the Board of Water and Soil Resources. That was before it did that big snow last week, so that was on Monday. So we were out there on the ground taking a look at it and found that, the work that's currently gone on out there is not in violation of WACA rule and would be consistent with the decision that we had made for no loss. That is contingent on making sure that the site is stabilized and you're not having that sediment discharge to the lake. I have reached out to the members of the Washington TEP since that meeting. So that is once again Ben with Bowser and then Jay Riggs with the Washington Soil and Water Conservation District to see if they have any recommendations for erosion control practices that could be implemented, blanket seeding, those sorts of things to stabilize the area. And then like both Robert and Stephen mentioned, there's some other issues that are ongoing out here that may be beyond Rice Creek, such as the off-highway vehicle use, work within the shoreland area, tree ordinances, those sorts of things that may be somewhat of a city idea. I have spoken with Nate Sparks at the city to kind of talk about, next steps, applications, those sorts of things.
One thing I'd like to add, Patrick, to that. Thanks for that summary. We have submitted a restoration plan to the city of Delwood in June, and we are waiting for them to finalize their review on that. So we do have a 3-year blanket, a native seed mix, as well as some native shrubs, with also a handful of tamarack specified to help mitigate the erosion and reestablish a native plant community that can handle foot traffic, but that can also stabilize that space with the limited amount of light that we have, because we're kind of in the shadow of some large silver maples and cottonwoods that are to the south of us. So we do have a restoration plan that we love, and we have already submitted that for city review already back in June. So that review is pending as we speak. But part of the problem is if we're going to continue to disturb it, the easement holders with their vehicle, it doesn't make sense for the Jensens to invest in restoring the area because it could very likely be immediately damaged. So that's kind of why we're in a holding pattern right now, because up to this point in time, the easement holders have said, well, Rice Creek Watershed District gave us permission to do X, Y, and Z. Some of those things the Watershed District has, and some of the things they haven't. So, but as I stated earlier to Patrick, and had a nice conversation with him about this within last week, perception is reality. If they're telling all the neighbors, well, Rice Creek said we could do this, but really it's not within Rice Creek's even preview to offer that permission, it's getting to be pretty sloppy right now how they're utilizing this no loss determination to kind of do whatever they want, and saying, well, we've got a piece of paper from Rice Creek that says we can do whatever we want. Furthermore, when they prepared the site for the dock, instead of just doing minor vegetation removal, like maybe, knocking down cattails or things of that nature with a machete or by hand, they actually hired a contractor that came in with a track hoe. They regraded the wetland area to flatten it out. They ripped out trees and stumps with the track hoe, and they also changed the hydrology and created a little mini swale or cut through and redirected the water to the property to the north, which is the Browns property. So by doing that, they pushed the hydrology closer to the Browns septic system, which is now impacting that. So I think part of the reason why we felt it was really important to talk to the board directly is we've got an application or an applicant that got permission from your organization is kind of running roughshod on utilizing that to do lots of other things that I don't think are within what the Watershed District was thinking that they were offering permission for. Additionally, we just wanted to also, kind of share where we're at because we do really need your help. So I'll turn it back over to Patrick or whoever else wants to continue the conversation.
President Preiner.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Nick Tomczyk, Administrator. Certainly the parties before you today are passionate about the situation, their property, the resource, and so on. Reinforcing what Patrick noted, we are a regulatory authority as part of our duties. All those authorities do have thresholds and detail that determine how and when we act. The district did, as was noted, issue a no loss for the property. That no loss is not without its bounds. There are specific details within it, but also noting that the application for no loss is not a required action by a landowner. Landowners may proceed with some activities without permit. As you've seen in any other area, the district is vigilant in assessing the entire district in areas where disturbance is taking place and whether or not it triggers our rules and such. And so Patrick has noted, we've been out there numerous times. I'm sure we will continue to monitor the situation, and at such time that it would cross any threshold, and again, in coordination with the other agencies that we're obliged to interact with, the TAP on the wetland issues, or any other staff internally for the district's rules, we will accordingly act to issue a notice of violation or to take those actions to get the situation corrected.
Madam President, this is Bradley.
Go ahead.
Number one, since we gave them a permit to put a boardwalk down and they haven't put a boardwalk down and they in fact don't have authority to put a boardwalk down, one of the things we might be able to do would be either suspend or revoke our permit, which would prevent them from now going forward and saying, that they have authorization from us. I don't know if we have any authority to stop anyone from driving over it. Clearly putting down and restoring this is a waste of time and money until someone can stop them from driving on it. And I wonder if someone's talked to DNR about this. I certainly, living on a lake, I know that people who tear down cattails can find themselves fined significant amounts of money by the DNR. DNR has concerns about cutting down banks and things. And you're right, we don't have enforcement authority. We're a regulatory authority, but DNR does.
Manager Bradley, this is Patrick Hughes. A couple of things to mention there. Excuse me. The first piece that you mentioned there with the no loss decision that was issued. So the boardwalk itself can meet WACA rule. Posts and pilings are not considered fill, and then as long as the boardwalk is elevated, not just sitting in the wetland, that can be allowed. The challenge was, as Mr. Massey mentioned, the city has ordinance, and the specific design did not meet their ordinance. So it is just multiple agencies and different review and those sorts of things. If a boardwalk were to be proposed once again, we would like to see that both the landowner here, the Jensens, and the easement holder, the Rindelobs, are both in agreement of what that design would look like and signing off for it going forward. It's, you kind of develop the site. As for the off-highway vehicle use, that is allowed per WACA. It's maybe not encouraged to use those vehicles in that area, but it is an allowable activity.
So, but my point is they are not building a boardwalk, so why don't we suspend or revoke our permit authorizing one?
President Priner?
Go ahead.
Yes, Manager Bradley and Patrick, I think that's a fine thing for staff to investigate. I'll note, not to be flippant to a manager, but we haven't issued a permit per se. We've recognized what is called a no loss, which is just to say that the activity isn't a regulated activity, and there's any number of things that would fall under that caption within that state rule. And that's why the involvement with Bowser for the additional guidance on it. But certainly we can look into taking that type of action and further making sure that DNR is apprised of the situation and their capacity for management and regulation on the public water would be fine. That is a distinct jurisdiction from the district's Wetland Conservation Act authorities.
Can I ask a quick question, and I don't know who would answer it? Is they have an easement, are they allowed to do this under the easement agreement?
One of the things this is Robert Jensen, that one of the things that's being litigated now is the vehicular use on the easement, because those that established the easement are no longer here. And so legally, the major determination as to what was intended and what can be done is determined by historical use. And historically, no one has ever used a vehicle on that easement until the Rindelobs came along. And we did have a trial regarding whether the easement was appurtenant to the property or personal. And during that time, the Rindelobs testified that they were using the easement at least 20 times a month. And that's been fine, because they've been walking in. They have 2 teenage kids and they're nice kids, and that hasn't been a problem. But they're pretty determined to drive to the lake. And we don't think that is legally permitted by the easement. And I think, but that's going to looks like it's going to have to be resolved by litigation. But I do think their vehicular use has been very disrupted to the easement. And I don't know easement rules or wetland rules really, but it is disturbing more than 100 square feet, which we were told was sort of the minimal or the maximum surface area that could be disturbed. So we would like them not to be driving ATVs over that area. It just creates so much mud. We're getting muck into the lake, and it's just not good. The other thing I would mention is the boardwalk was in place for a little over 2 months. And when it was removed, all the vegetation beneath it was dead because it totally blocked out the sunlight. So that is disruptive to the surface vegetation. And when you have that much bared soil, unsecured soil, it's washing down to that overflow pipe that we depend on that goes 200 feet then to the lake. So we just want the soil stabilized, and we don't want it continually torn up.
Okay, I would like to ask our legal, please.
Pardon?
Mr. Smith?
Yes, Madam
Yes, could
President.
you give us a little insight from your opinion as to what direction we can go?
Yeah, Madam President, this discussion about the nature of the easement rights really is a matter between the easement holder and the Mr.
Right.
Jensen, as he's referring.
Right.
We have erosion control provisions in our rules that have area size triggers, and I sense that we're not exceeding 10,000 square feet to trigger a required permit for land altering activity and erosion control here. So we're left with the wetland aspects, the no loss determination, and monitoring compliance with those provisions that we issued before. I think the issue of contacting the DNR is an appropriate one. So I think that's where our jurisdiction sits.
Okay, thank you. Other comments from the board?
Madam Chair, this is Marjorie Moynihan. Unfortunately, we see this not only in our watershed, but probably throughout the whole state of Minnesota, where you've got landowners, lakeshore owners that find themselves at the intersection of the watershed, the community, the city led regulations, DNR, wetland issues. So I think that it's very appropriate for these folks to come before us to ask for some assistance. And I believe, if I'm understanding this correctly, there is a Bowser DNR, the watershed, as Patrick was referring to. Do you have a technical assistance group or something? Some way that you can assist, facilitate some resolution here. That would probably be our role.
Okay. Anybody else?
President, excuse me, President Kreiner.
Yes.
Nick Tomczak, Administrator, thank you. No concerns with the conversation, certainly. I think we've covered all the items. I see the action steps as district first and foremost under its own regulations and authorities and responsibilities to monitor for any violation, continue that into the future, reach out to DNR. So at a basis, they're aware of the situation and they can take any action that's under their authority and guide. Certainly provide the resource, knowledge and expertise that the district has and our partners, Washington Conservation District, the State for Wetland Conservation Act, so on and so forth. When any of the parties wishes to elevate its work to protect the resource and enhance it, certainly we would encourage that, but we don't always have the regulatory authority or hammer to do that. So we can certainly put all three of those things into play to know that they're available as action items.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Anything else?
President Reiner, this is Nasty. Yeah, one quick question. Patrick and I discussed earlier within the last week that maybe as a way to close out the 2017 no loss determination, there is some technical aspects of that they haven't completed. They were required as part of that action that was allowed. The applicant was to put erosion control and revegetate the space. So maybe this is a question for Patrick. Are you guys in the process of drafting a letter to go out to all parties that should state that they need to complete what they've started? Since there is no, since 2017, they've had this action open, but it hasn't actually been restored. So I guess I'll turn that over to Patrick or Nick if you can address that.
President Preiner, if I could interrupt from the question, I do note, it looks like Teresa or the home site has a hand up.
Yes.
And we're happy to respond to Mr. Masty's question as well.
Okay, let's have Patrick finish commenting and then we'll go to Manager Waller.
Sure. Thanks, President Preiner. Yes. So within the Wetland Conservation Act for no loss and exemption activities, there is a condition that appropriate erosion and sediment control practices are utilized. So that is something that was discussed and included in that application from the 2017 no loss determination. And so that is, I have reached out to Washington Conservation District and the Board of Water and Soil Resources to get some feedback on, here's what the condition currently looks like, what might be recommended to, be implemented here.
Okay, Manager Waller.
Yes, my question, thank you, Madam President. My question's about the 8-inch pipe. Is that recorded at the Soil Water Conservation District or at the city, or are we making a recording of it now that we know it exists as a drainage? And second, how that impacted this septic system or the loss of, was that the protection for the septic system, the 8-inch drainage?
Actually, I think this is Robert Jensen. I think it's at least 10 inches. So it's wider than 8 inches. But that, when we purchased the property 43 years ago, that overflow pipe was in place. And there was a standing pond that was probably 25 to 30 feet in diameter and a couple feet deep, and there were even ducks in the pond. And that actually totally obstructed the easement, but the people that lived there at the time would just walk around the pond and their property. And we have septic systems in Delwood, and there was only one place on the property that passed the percolation test. So we had to put our driveway where we did. Anyway, we had a newborn infant and our first child, and I didn't want that standing pond. So we did have topographical surveys, a grading plan, and that we submitted to Rice Creek, and it was reviewed at the time. And I wanted that pond removed because I was worried about young kid getting in there and then not being able to get out because it was all muddy and there was water there at all times. And so we were allowed then by Rice Creek to extend that drain pipe about 30 feet so that we crossed the pond, and then we filled that in. And it was right next to where we had to put our driveway. There was only one place we could put a driveway because of where we were going to have to put our septic system. And so all of those things were reviewed and approved by Rice Creek before we were able to proceed and build our home.
Madam President?
Yes.
So thank you very much, Mr. Jensen. Staff, could you give about a year or what time that took place so staff could research the records and for their information there? It'd be helpful.
Probably would be 77 and 78, 1977 and 1978.
Thank you.
And Madam President?
Go ahead.
This is Stephen Massey again. As a follow-up, when we did our panel meeting for the wetland, Jay Riggs was on site. He observed the plume of muddy water going into White Bear Lake and extended to I and Dr. Rob that if we wanted to put together a plan that would help the water quality, that the county would be excited to help cost share or grant something with us, because obviously there was a water quality issue there. So that's what we proceeded to do. We put a plan together that not only stabilized the wetland area that has been disturbed, but also transformed the lawn and the area where this 8 or 10 inch pipe is, and actually remove the pipe and put in an infiltration system would still allow for that water to flow as not to negatively impact the Jensen's or the Brown's septic systems, but would actually do something to filter the water instead of it running 200 feet in a pipe untreated. So we do have a very, what I would consider from a water quality standpoint, a very thorough plan and approach that we presented to all parties, including the county, Rice Creek Watershed District, and the city of Delwood, that we're wanting everybody to react to, that actually removes that pipe and replaces it with something that actually does a great job of dealing with the water quality from our perspective. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think we're ready to move forward. Nick, you want to recap our goals here?
Yes, President Preiner, we will be in contact with the DNR, noting their potential authorities on the situation at hand, continue to work with the TEP in regards to our Wetland Conservation Act measures, and the TEP and what other resources the district has in regards to anything outside of our regulation that preserves and promotes the resources of the district.
Madam President, I also heard, Nick, that Patrick was working to figure out about restoration.
President Preiner?
Yes, go ahead.
We're happy to respond to things about restoration that are outside of our regulations. I'll note that certainly there's an underlying element of the land rights. The district does move forward under its regulatory program when a landowner or other party has demonstrated reasonable land rights to proceed with a project, but that is an independent obligation of them to ultimately have that. So we're happy to respond to whatever either the easement holder or the landowner themselves would like to do.
Madam President, I misunderstood Patrick. Patrick, could you clarify what you were continuing to work with others on the restoration issue?
Yeah, I think there's maybe a distinction there between restoration and stabilization of the site. I was specifically speaking to provisions in WACA for disturbed soils, lack of vegetation, those sorts of things. So if there was, a blanket biolog to prevent sediment going downstream through that pipe into White Bear Lake, and seeding, those sorts of things.
I would like to see if we can't impose that as a burden on the people who've torn up the land.
The only other thing I would like to say is I kind of like to see a deadline as to when we're going to comment back so these gentlemen can know what our final issues are going to be. Do you have any idea how long it'll take us to provide them that information?
President Preiner, Nick Tomchak, Administrator. I believe that might be a challenge in that we have two parties who are independently, although they are putting forth efforts to work cooperatively, to some extent, independently taking action. So it is a bit of a fluid situation. I would certainly believe that the 3-4 items that we noted as action steps for district staff are something we can do, I'll just say in a 2-week period generally, and we can certainly provide the board an update.
Okay.
But again, if
Whatever.
things change on the site, maybe that changes the actions. Thank you.
I agree. Anything else from the board members? Okay, gentlemen, well, thank you for coming. We're going to continue with our agenda.
Thanks for having us. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is everybody, Rob, do you know how to get off of the line?
+16516461020. Is now
Okay.
exiting.
We're going to go ahead with items requiring board action. Number 1, professional services. Nick?
Thank you, President Preiner. As you may recall, every 2 years, a watershed district is required to solicit interest proposals for our consultants services. You recently authorized and considered the resultant proposals at the October 12th workshop. And there was consensus for Houston Engineering as district engineer, Smith Partners as general counsel, Rinke Noonan for public drainage, legal counsel, and Redpath for accounting services. Staff is simply asking for the board to authorize the administrator to enter into the resultant contracts with those firms.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Madam Chair, this is Manager Wynett. I move to authorize the district administrator on advice of council to execute the contract extensions with Houston Engineering Incorporated, Smith Partners, Rinke Noonan, and Redpath and Company in accordance with the terms of the submitted proposals.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yes, Madam President.
Go ahead.
Yes, I have a couple of comments to make here. We just had an example of where we have a problem with upstream or downstream drainage issues. We've had many of these. And the engineering company hasn't really provided us with any plan or rule changes to solve these problems. I think that's an important point. It gets back to our comments about water knows no boundaries. And that's what the situation is here with the septic system and the drainage. This is just another one of the many items that have come up here. So I'm very disappointed that as the 10 years is going to come in the future, we haven't attacked this problem, which has been going on for decades. As for the legal community or the accounting group, I don't have any comments or objections to them. And as for the legal, I don't have any comments or objections with Rinke Noonan, but with Smith Partners, I feel that they recently in January failed to declare their financial interest when they took the action to write support, write that memorandum in January. And I think when they did that their action also denied constitutional rights of freedom of speech and assembly to the Board of Managers, and that the taxpayers' representation didn't exist in spending those tax dollars. So because this is one motion together, and I feel so strongly about Smith Partners, I'm going to vote no this morning. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Not, we do have a motion and a second. And we will go roll call. Manager Waller?
No.
Manager Wynant?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wagaman? Manager Wagaman?
He's frozen.
Yes.
Yes,
Sorry about
and
that.
Manager Priner, yes. All right, then we're going to move on to number 2, 2021 Storm Management Grant Program. That'll be Kyle. Kyle?
Right. Madam President, members of the board, for your consideration today is our final draft request for proposals package, including application form and program guidelines for the 2021 Stormwater Management Grant Program. We talked about this at a previous workshop earlier in the month, and there are 3 items that I would like to just note before we have you consider this, and these are noted on my memo on page 30 in your packet. So again, for this year, the RFP is planned to offer up to $300,000 in funding to eligible applicants for the 2021 program year. And we have noted again in previous discussions, and there has been notes added to the RFP letter and the program guidelines that due to revenue uncertainties that may occur in the future due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the board is reserving its right to potentially reduce or eliminate funding for this program at a future date. And that if that notification were to occur after applications are received and before funding would be awarded, applicants will be notified of any changes that would be implemented by the board. Secondly, we have exhausted our Bowser watershed-based funding pilot program funds, which were made available back originally in the 2019 program year. We had a little bit left over that was offered and allocated in 2020. So any references to that program, that funding source, have been eliminated from this program for the 2021 year. And then third, from the workshop, we had a clarification that was recommended to be added by Manager Bradley, and there seemed to be enough support on the board at the workshop that I have incorporated additional language in Section 3 of the program guidelines, and that's regarding the use of stormwater reuse projects that are funded through this program for any future Rice Creek Rule C regulatory purposes. So I'm going to share my screen here just so everybody can see this. Hopefully. And so hopefully folks can see this, and we are specifically looking at basically the last sentence of the first paragraph of Section 3, and it reads that any Rice Creek Watershed District Rule C water quality treatment credits created by a stormwater reuse project may not be used to satisfy Rice Creek Rule C. I'm sorry. Let me read this again. Any Rice Creek Rule C water quality treatment credits created by a stormwater reuse project may not be used to satisfy Rule C requirements for other projects that either 1, drain to a different resource of concern, or 2, are located downstream from the proposed stormwater reuse project. And I believe the reasoning for that was that Manager Bradley and others saw the value in essentially placing some boundaries on the district's use of its what is otherwise discretionary spending through this grant program. It doesn't change the rule or the requirements in the rule. It does just kind of rein in a little bit the use of that exception that was established back in 2017 that originally allowed reuse projects to be used for for rule compliance. So it does rein that in a little bit just to ensure that the reuse project that's being used needs to be located downstream of the project that is using it for credit, if that's clear enough. So with that, there's no other changes proposed to the program, and certainly nothing else since our last workshop discussion. I'd be open to any questions or discussion on the topic. And we have a draft motion for the board on page 31 of the packet.
Any questions for Kyle before we have a motion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam President, this is Manager Wagaman. I move to authorize staff to initiate the 2021 Stormwater Management Grant Program and to notify potential applicants of funding availability by publishing the attached requests for proposals.
I would second that. This is Manager Wynant.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Madam President,
Go ahead.
I support the authorization language grant program, but without the additional language that was put in about upstream. I realize that's for all future things, but I think that provides the cities with an unnecessary handicap. The purpose here is to get as much water quality as we can and get the funding for it. So I don't see any reason for that additional issue. I thought we had a large discussion about this with the issues with Hugo already. Our progressive communities like Hugo and Matamidi, Circle Pines and Atlanta Lakes, and other communities could use that extra money to make sure that these things get done. And I believe the city, you can trust the cities. So I'm very disappointed with that added language. Although the program as a whole, I think it's been very good.
Okay.
That was my position at the workshop, and I haven't changed it.
Okay, any other board members want to comment? Okay, we have a motion on the table. Manager Waller.
No.
Manager Wynant.
Yes.
Manager Bradley.
Yes.
Manager Wagaman.
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Motion passes. Okay, next thing on the agenda is we got the stormwater management letter to the DNR. That'd be Nick.
Yes, President Priner, Board of Managers, recently at the October 14th meeting, DNR did present to the board on Rice Lake and Anoka, Washington, Judicial Ditch 2 and the impoundment. From that meeting, consensus was to communicate to the DNR on the matter, to recognize the productive relationship so far, the multi-jurisdictional issues, and the ongoing drainage issues and responsibility. Moving out of the existing JPA into what our future relationship will look like in ensuring that those multiple interests are met. The letter that is on page 42 of your packet does also request that the DNR issue a permanent permit to the district in regards to the maintenance provision, and similar to those of the JPA provisions that were in place for the 2-year term. Looks for them to consider removal of the dead cattail mass that exists in the area from the spraying, aerial spraying of the area to prevent a water quality impairment, and also to assist in reduction of future channel maintenance that either party would be undertaking. Further, noting the comments after their presentation and concerns with the elevation of the weir and the potential impacts to the landowners in the area, or the noted impacts, I should say, by Manager Waller, that they consider whether the impoundment weir could be modified to a lower elevation. Long story short, I think this looks to have a productive relationship with the DNR in trying to address these things, and gives an indication to DNR to take action on those things and engage staff further. With that, certainly any comments on the letter that there may be, but we would be looking for a motion to authorize the president of the board to sign it, for the letter to be sent, and then certainly staff will engage on the content.
Any questions for Nick?
Madam President, I'll move the letter be sent.
I would second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for the issues about the current landowners, staff, and putting that forward. I thought the letter encapsulated the meeting very well. And so I hope we can work forward with the department, and as the greater and greater development, more homes are built in that lake basin. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Winant?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wageman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Motion moves forward. Hey, check register?
Madam President, I move to approve the check register dated October 28th, 2020 in the amount of $1,135,103.73, prepared by Redpath and Company. And I will note the reason that it is so high is there was 3 large payments to contractors that just happened to hit all at this time. So that's why it's so high.
I would second that.
We have
Manager
a motion and
Wyatt?
a second. Any further discussion? Manager Waller?
Yes.
Manager Winant?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wageman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is number 5, which I added on. In our last special meeting, it was noted that information was sent to Washington County and asked to be put on the agenda. I think it was November. And so what I want to do now is I just want to make a verbal complaint against Manager Waller on the Code of Ethics. And I can prepare and have a written statement by Friday, because I wasn't realizing, I think it would be a good thing for the Washington County Board to realize the complaint. And so I need to do it in writing, but I can't do it today. So obviously I would like to. And then if you want to, we can set a special meeting to make sure it gets on the agenda at Washington County. So everybody can think about that a minute. And Because this is considered my verbal complaint.
Madam President, it's my understanding that any one of us can call for a special meeting, and that's your intent. So what time on Monday?
What time works with everybody? Or afternoon, or morning? How about 1
Doesn't
o'clock?
matter. For me, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
We don't have a workshop on Monday, right?
No.
Right.
President,
1 o'clock would work for me. Even 2 o'clock might be better.
Okay. Staff, Nick, you want to set a time or?
President Preiner, 1 p.m. is our typical time, which seems reasonable, dependent on all manager feedback. I think it's important for all of you to be present in these types of matters. Secondarily, certainly having your counsel available for any guidance on the issue would be important. So I suggest that you consider Mr. Smith's schedule and his availability.
Well, let's go back to the first thing Marcy said, that it'd be better for her at 2. Is 2 a workable situation for everybody?
Yep.
Might as well, everybody have time. Mr.
That
Smith?
would work for staff.
Madam President, that time works for me. I think I would note 2 things for just the record.
Mm-hmm.
For the sake of clarity, I'd understand the complaint that you're making verbally, President Preiner, to be based on the statement that the board adopted at its special meeting on Monday. At least that's, okay,
It's under our code of ethics
right.
is how I want to present
And
it.
then secondly, the meeting that we would hold on Monday would be a closed meeting.
That is whatever is the right process.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's under the bylaws.
Okay, all right.
You know, Madam President, may I ask a question? I also planned on making a formal complaint, but should I be doing that now to make sure that it's covered at the same time? As I want to make sure that mine is in before you go to Washington County. And I guess I hadn't got far enough into it yet to think. So I don't know how I proceed.
It'd be more efficient for the board if we just, it's up to you, Manager Wegman, if you want to present it for Friday, and then they could have time to read it also. Is that okay?
Yeah,
That's right.
I would like to, yes, I would like to have mine available at the same time.
Madam President, I think that's appropriate. I think there's an important principle here of notice of whatever the complaint is to the manager that's the subject of the complaint.
Madam President, Lewis, it would seem to me from what, if complaints are limited to the issue that we've already met and ruled on, we can act quicker than if they bring in other grievances. So I think if they bring in other grievances, we need time to investigate those. Do you want to comment on that?
Madam President, Manager Bradley, I would concur.
Okay.
President Preiner,
Go ahead.
I guess I would like to seek a bit of clarity as well then. My understanding from the actions of the board at the recent special meeting was to issue a statement regarding the integrity of the district's decisions to date. That is, and there was also some passionate comments in regards to the underlying issues that caused us, the district, to take that action. I guess I don't necessarily believe that the statement itself or the board's action is a complaint, but rather just a statement, and obviously it carried with it communication to Washington County that they were aware of it. Them being aware of it doesn't really go farther to what we might ask of the county, if anything. If I could, Louis, I'd turn to you. Is that distinction I'm making important, or I just want the board to have all managers to have the utmost guidance in this issue?
Thank you, Madam President. In response to Nick's questions or comments, what I was referring to this statement, I guess what I meant is the brochure that was the subject of the statement and Manager Waller's written comments in that brochure were what I understood to be the basis of the complaint. If there are other complaints about other subject matter, it would be important to provide whoever is the subject of the complaint notice of that, which I understand that you intend to do by Friday. And then the board will take this matter up on Monday and hear from all of the managers and whatever information is available then. And then you will make decisions about action steps depending on what's in front of you at that time.
President Preiner, if I might make a reflective statement to Mr. Smith, thank you for the clarity. And I'm understanding the statement now to be the brochure, and to me the manager's complaint certainly revolves around that, and the additional communication, if any, that they provide would Manager Preiner noted the code of ethics and how those two may interplay. In other words, under the detail of the code of ethics, how there is a concern in their mind that they'd like to articulate. Thank you.
I believe that's what we're trying to accomplish. Like I said, it was just a little bit late today, so I can only do it verbally. So I would like to submit that on Friday so that all board members can hear the complaint and be prepared for meeting on Monday. Anybody else have a comment?
Well, same for me. This is Steve.
Okay.
A related issue. Nick, would you be kind enough to forward to all of the managers the email that I sent to Washington County?
President Preiner, yes, Manager Bradley, I'd be happy to forward that email.
Okay, so I believe now then what we need is to have a vote, or did we already do that, as to setting a special meeting at 2 o'clock on Monday?
I wasn't aware it required a vote.
Well, maybe it doesn't require a vote. I guess that's my question.
You requested it and it's been granted and we've come up with a time.
Okay.
Madam President, under your bylaws, it's the several ways in which a meeting can be called. But as to the special meeting, it's the board. And I think there's a consensus direction of the board here for the minutes to reflect that. To be especially clear, you could have a motion. And I think that would then also provide some clarity about the expectations for the Monday meeting.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion.
I think you should make the motion.
Okay, I'll make the motion to set a special meeting for next Monday at 2 o'clock, whatever that date is, the 2nd, to proceed with a special closed door meeting regarding a complaint being filed against Manager Waller and based on the code of ethics of the Rice Creek Watershed.
Well, I will second it because I believe it's certainly your right to call for such a meeting.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll call for a vote. Manager Waller?
No.
Manager Winan?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yes.
Manager Wagaman?
Yes.
And Manager Preiner, yes. So we will have a meeting next Monday. All right, so the next thing on the agenda is Ramsey County Ditch 11. Kyle.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, I'm here just for hopefully a brief informational presentation. I'm gonna again attempt to share my screen here. All right. So as you know, our last board meeting, we had pay request number 1 with Peterson Companies for this project, and had a verbal report of progress at that time. Since that time, the project is complete, 100% complete at this time. And I wanted to just share with you a quick overview of the project and some highlights and construction photos, just so you can see what's happened out there. So here's, again, just an outline of the presentation. We'll go through those things. And then just to kind of re-highlight the benefits of this project, or the primary benefits. Water quality improvements, again, we're looking at an iron enhanced sand filter on Ramsey County Ditch 11 that drains to Bald Eagle Lake. We're expecting phosphorus loading to the lake to be reduced by roughly 43 pounds a year. And sediment loading should be reduced by 1.4 tons per year based on our engineering estimates. As well as that, the habitat in the area is going to be improved as well. We've got a new wet stormwater pond that was installed in line with the ditch, which provides some unique habitat in the area, as well as native plantings around the entire 3/4 of an acre site for some, again, additional upland habitat as well. We had several partners on this project, namely the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources and the funding from the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment. Rice Creek was successful in receiving a $392,000 grant to help construct this project. Rice Creek's share of cost for the project is roughly $100,000, which includes some cash investment as well as staff time in administering and carrying out the project. And then White Bear Township, valuable contribution by them as well, as they essentially donated, well, it's still in their ownership, but allowed us to use 3/4 of an acre of property that the township had in their possession adjacent to Four Seasons Park. And so they've been a great active partner, helping me out, coordinating some things with the project as we've moved through. I'll touch a little bit on our original budget versus our actual budget for this project. Originally, we were looking at about $490,000 in total. $380,000 of that was estimated to be set aside for construction and purchase of all of the iron enhanced sand filter mechanical system components and electrical systems from EPG companies. We had $85,000 set aside as an estimate for engineering and legal, and then another $25,000 for staff time on the project and educational signage. While we're complete with construction of the project, we do have a few other items that will run us into 2021 on this project, namely the installation of educational signage and then other grant administration primarily. To date, we're sitting at about $482,000 of total expenses. Construction is slightly under budget, and that is roughly a final number for construction at $365,000. Engineering and legal costs are slightly over budget, and staff time we're sitting at around $20,000 so far. When it's all said and done, I think that we'll come out very, very close to being right at that $490,000 number that we originally estimated. So again, we're looking, where is the project? Again, it's the Ramsey County Ditch 11 Watershed, which is here just between White Bear Lake and Bald Eagle Lake. Most of you should know where this is, I would imagine. Specifically, though, we're looking just west of Highway 61 along Eagle Street. These are the two parcels here in hatched yellow that the township provided for use of the project. Historically, this was just kind of a wooded corner, the southern part of these two parcels. There used to be a couple of homesteads just to the north here that had been previously removed by the township. At the beginning of this project, I noted previously Ramsey County had was planning to complete some culvert replacement work under Eagle Street directly at the location of our project. You can see ditch 11 here in the photo. This was a highly eroded, unstable, unsafe culvert crossing on ditch 11, and that work was completed this spring. I believe by May the county was done with that work. New culvert in place, bringing these two, the road culvert and the ditch 11 culvert, into a large manhole with a nice new stable outlet. And so that work was fortunately able to be done before we got into the site, and allowed us to kind of build off of that. The project plans, again, just another brief summary. That culvert replacement at the top end of the screen here that Ramsey County completed. Ditch would then flow through a new pond here, constructed in that triangle area of the property, and then discharge. This is to the west, to the bottom of your screen. We've got an intake with a pretreatment chamber and a lift station with a small pump that feeds water back to the east to our vault here at the entrance to the site. And we have automatic valves in there that are controlled that send water where we want it to go to each of these 2 iron enhanced sand filter beds. And then once the water gets there and is treated, it flows through that filter bed to a set of drain tiles that are installed in the bottom of these beds, which then discharge back to Ramsey County Ditch 11 through this, what we call our manual valve vault. This allows us to easily take monitoring samples so we can monitor the effectiveness of the project over time. I will note both of these filter beds were lined with a heavy poly liner. The location of the project is within the emergency response zone of one of White Bear Township's wells. And so this is an area where we do not want to encourage any additional infiltration of stormwater into the ground. So again, we're taking water from the ditch, running it into essentially a poly-lined filter bed so that all of the water then goes back to the ditch and doesn't go in the ground. And that was at the request of the township and would be consistent with their groundwater or their wellhead protection plan. So now we'll just run through some photos. Kind of at the very, very beginning of construction in mid-August, you can see here, this is the new outlet of Ramsey County's culvert. This is Ditch 11 heading west into our project site. They've got a nice stable embankment here now and riprap, and only 1 culvert entrance into this area of the ditch instead of 2. And then here on the right-hand side, we've got some site clearing underway. Again, most of this site was fairly heavily wooded, with a lot of overgrowth and the buckthorn and things like that. But the ditch banks were fairly unstable through here, with again a lot of buckthorn coverage and not a lot of low understory vegetation growing along the banks. You can see here, I do want to note as well, we did have a lot of sediment buildup in Ramsey County Ditch 11 in this location between Eagle Street and Park. And you can kind of see it here. There's about 2 feet of sediment built up in this ditch. We did take a look at, once project got underway, we did take a look at removing that sediment from the ditch along with construction of this project. The spoil location for that ditch sediment was going to need to be placed on an adjacent township property. The township did ask that we check that sediment for contamination. Again, it is within the emergency response zone of their wellhead area. And so we did do that, and we did find some contamination down actually quite a ways away from this site, but down towards Park Avenue. So we have postponed the removal of that sediment until such time that we kind of have enough time to deal with what we found. It was some diesel-related organics, likely from a historical fuel spill in the area, likely unrelated to the ditch itself.
Excuse me, Kyle, are others getting the pictures or is it just my?
No, we're getting.
You're getting pictures. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, is everyone able to see the slides that I'm going through?
Yes.
Okay, great.
All right. All right, so just wanted to give the board a note about that, and that'll.
There we go. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. And on the right-hand side here, construction is now getting underway. And in order to build that pond on the ditch, Peterson did a great job on this project, I will note. They decided to reroute Ditch 11 temporarily through this a plastic line diversion channel. And they threw a culvert in there so they could get across the ditch to excavate the pond. This worked very well. That diversion was in place for maybe a week or 2 at tops, and it allowed them to access the site, do what they needed to do. We had, as far as I could tell, very little sediment leave the site due to that polyline channel. I think it really worked as a good option for a project like this. It helped that late in the summer too, water levels in the ditch and flow rates dropped off dramatically as we got into a drier part of the year. So here you can see the pond, mass grading for the pond is nearly complete at this time. It's a about a 6-foot deep pond right now. and maybe 6 or 7 feet at the deepest point. And then here you can see these are the intake for the lift station and then our 2 manholes here that provide pretreatment, and then the lift station and the pump go in this foreground manhole. At this point, middle of September, pond excavation was completed and ditch 11 flow was routed back through the pond. We did have a lot of suspended sediment at that time as that pond bottom healed itself up. But we did have some dry weather, which helped minimize sediment transport downstream. They did have a silt curtain at the outlet of the pond. And ultimately now if you go out there, the water's quite clear in the pond at this time. Next phase of the project was excavating the 2 iron enhanced sand filter beds. And so we've got some photos here of the rough grading for one of the beds going in, and then later on the again installation of that plastic liner. This is some of the drain tile piping coming out through the liner, and then the lower layers of rock being installed to cover up that drain tile. After the layers of rock are installed, then they go back in and install this iron enhanced sand mixture. That's approximately 5% by mass. And again, all this installation went very well. Had the White Bear Press out there that day, got some photos of the project, and they ultimately did run a little story on it, which was nice to see in the local media. And then this is more recently here, middle of October. Peterson got out there and prepped the topsoil that was on site. It's a native seed mix that was placed across the entire project area, and the entire site was covered in erosion control blanket. So hopefully we'll see some nice germination, and again, nice prairie flowers and wildflowers and grasses growing up next spring. And this gives you a couple shots. It's hard to get hard to get the whole site in a single photo. So here's what the site looks like today with the pond and the sand filter beds. And you can see here, we actually did get the system up and running for about 4 days earlier this month, just to make sure that everything was operating properly. That all went very well. And we have since winterized the site and pulled the pump out and put that in storage. So next spring we'll get everything reinstalled and away we go. Again, the site, the project is construction-wise is 100% complete. And I believe we are looking at a final pay request from Peterson in the very near future. I think you'll probably see that at your on the agenda at your November board meeting. With that, again, open to any questions you may have. Again, it's a successful project, and it was fun to work on, and we'll get another one going in the future, I would hope.
I don't have any questions, but I certainly want to comment on you doing such a nice job, Kyle. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam President, I'm always concerned when I see a new attractive nuisance like a pond in the neighborhood. Will this freeze up like a real pond, or will this not freeze up as much? Do we need signage, thin ice, anything?
Good question. I would expect this pond will freeze up solid in the winter. Ditch 11, this year as we're going into winter has a very, very low base flow rate in it right now. There's not a lot of water moving there. So at the inlet and the outlet of the pond, you might see some thinner ice there. That's something I can certainly talk to the township about. That it is their property. If there's something that they would like to see done there, the cost of some signage is not really too much of an issue. So they haven't voiced any concerns about management of the site in that way.
My assumption is Minnesotans know about ice and stuff, but if this has a flow, if it's not acting as a normal pond, then I have a concern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll check with the township to see if there's anything that they would like to see there.
Thank you.
Madam President?
Yes.
Very nice job, Kyle. I think one of the things that you didn't show was that huge wetland where a ton of phosphorus is coming out of. It's east of Highway 61. I'm sure that's contributing. And this is a help to clean that output up, because White Bear Lake probably has very little phosphorus coming out of it. Although I don't know if we've ever ever taken any readings over there, but I would think that by the time it goes through that large narrow leaf cattail bog that's there, it adds phosphorus to the flow. And this is a great project which is something we can manage every year. It's not something that we put in the water, we're actually taking the phosphorus out. So thank you for the work on this. Looks good.
Anybody else? If not, we'll move on to staff reports. Anybody have any questions on any of our staff reports today?
President Reiner,
Go ahead.
I'd just like to note I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
Go ahead. Before Nick, then we talk about November, December calendar. Everybody sees the calendar today and that'll work for you?
Yeah, President Reiner, I was just going to note the November, December calendar, as we usually do, is a little bit different than normal because of the holiday that occur in those months, and also that the December meeting is at 7 p.m., December 11th, and November 10th meeting is on Tuesday. Teresa has highlighted those accordingly.
Okay, any questions from the board?
Well, just I would point out that December 11th is a Friday.
That should be the 9th.
How did you do that, Teresa?
That's the 9th.
Okay.
You have it right. You have it right on the pictorial up above.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else? Good catch. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on then. Administrator updates.
Yes, President Reiner, Board of Managers, I do have a number of items that I think it's important for me to communicate on. I had sent email of my one-on-one virtual meeting with the two Washington County commissioners and the noted issues that were brought up, one being Lost Lake, and that's been an ongoing concern for the landowners in the area, or a couple of them, and Manager Waller certainly has advocated for the district in that regard. I just want to note that the district's interaction with any given body of water is largely based on its assembly of a lake association or volunteers, etc., because we do need a good sampling of the lakes and such to have a scientific basis to move forward, so we know the action steps that we're taking are for improvement of the water body. With that, specific to Lost Lake, we did have a volunteer in the past that kind of went on and off for a bit, and now we've lost them altogether. But we did have some communication with the county, and I asked their public works folks if they would be so kind as to assist the landowners in that regard, which they said they would do. So I'm happy to report we'll be able to get that sampling started in the next growing season, and we'll coordinate with them. Secondly, the next, after the individual meetings with the two commissioners of Washington County, we did have what is called the Water Management Organization Workshop, where they review all those organizations' budget and projects for the year. During that, Commissioner Miron did note Rice Creek's slide and of him recognize the importance of the public drainage system regardless of future development. In our slide, we had noted how the future development was rather dependent on the system. I just wanted you to know that I was raising my hand on and off virtually. Unfortunately, I was unsuccessful in gathering his attention. I did follow up by email with him. We are indeed on the same page. I told him that certainly the district recognizes that this is an obligation the district has to the benefited landowners, regardless of the current or future land use, but always important for us to be looking to the future. The district, moving on from that, we have signed 2 task orders, one on 10/22/32, which was looking at the headwaters and the ASIC. We also entered into one on GIS and the database that has to do with some of our background tools that we are using. And I did forward Manager Bradley's email. I make note of that right now so that Teresa, if she could print that so Manager Waller may have it before he leaves the office. And then finally, noting the conversation today and also in many previous meetings on the upstream, downstream, and the impacts to potential impact to adjacent property owners. This has been raised. We have discussed it as best we can thus far. I want to be clear that the rules do include at this time assessment of those impacts. It's what we call adverse impact, and the engineer has in place some measure of how we're doing that. All the past communications and so on, staff are still needing, as well as the consultant, some clarity on how robust or what this looks like in the future. To that end, and to Manager Waller's comment today, his comments in this issue, therefore, is on the workshop on the 9th. And at that time, we can discuss and look at what exactly, to what extent are we looking for the engineer to look into this, and what might the task order and some of the detail of that be. So I didn't want it to appear that staff isn't reflecting on it or addressing it. We need some more guidance, and that's the place when we can do it. That is all I have, President Preiner.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Nick today?
President Preiner, this is Marcy. Yes, I do have a question. Nick, we are now well into 6 months of remote work, and we know how it's probably impacting us as managers. Can you give me an update, give us an update on how staff are doing?
Sure. President Preiner, the last Board of Managers, President Preiner, the last action by the board in regards to this was to extend to the end of the year this virtual approach. I think that gave some certainty to staff. The news on the subject matter of COVID continues. It is always in the news, and there's broadcast of elevated concern. So I think in doing that, the board gave certainty to staff that working remotely was fine. I think they're adhering to our preparedness plan, and I've heard no concerns, if you will, of completing their work and getting things done in the virtual landscape.
Well, thank you. In reviewing the reports from each staff, it doesn't appear like the workload has gone down or not been met. So compliments to the ability for each one of them to adapt to this situation and still get done what's needed to be done. So I certainly appreciate these updates from each of the board, from the staff.
1 second, Manager Waller. I would just want to ask Nick, I think at our last mod meeting, suggested that all the government agencies are going out to June or July. And I'm just wondering if that's something we should consider at this time to give a more stability to it.
Yeah. Yes, President Preiner. I'm happy to discuss that with the board. I think that's a fine idea. It's very hard for us in all matters to whether it be our revenue stream or what have you, to crystal ball the future and know where we're headed. All indications are that this would carry into the future, and if other agencies are extending to that time frame, that seems reasonable. Perhaps it's good for us to have a formal action in that regard. Maybe not.
Yeah, I think we should. I don't know if we want to do, we don't necessarily do it today, but I would like you to research which other agencies and actually their timeframes, if you would.
Certainly. President Preiner, I'd be happy to, and that way I think we'd be able to demonstrate adherence to the governor's order as well as your own declaration of emergency and such, and make sure everything's buttoned down as Manager Waller refers to it.
Manager Waller, comment?
Madam President, that's the exact issue I wanted to raise, was the extension of this work order at least until June or July next year. In my understanding, that's what the state has done, at least the one department I'm very familiar with. They plan to work at home until June 1st, or for certain, as I understand, or July 1st, somewhere in there. So thank you very much for bringing that issue up, and I have support extensions without any more discussion.
Yeah, Madam President, so there are three of us who wanted to raise that, because I too was listening to the MAUD, and yes, all of the agencies were explaining to us that they are extending this, and anyone who's been following the news knows we're not going to be out of here by the end of this year. So we can always pull it back if some miracle occurs.
Well,
let's hope so. I'm for miracles.
Let's just have Nick do his research, and then we'll have a motion at our next regular board meeting, and then we can solidify the reasons that we're doing it again. Anything else? Manager updates. Anybody like to make any comments?
Well, Madam President, I attended the Washington County Water Management meeting, a workshop in person, and listened to Commissioner Miron, and I'm going to add this, Nick. He complimented the Watershed District on the use of the word utility for the ditch system. And that came out of the workshop with the two commissioners on the Friday, which I attended also. And that was a word that was very important to Commissioner Miron there. As with Commissioner Karwoski, he wants to have something done over. He had a couple of different things. Well, Lost Lake was one, and I'm glad to hear you're taking some action on this with Washington County Conservation Districts and Washington County, because it's a long time standing issue. So thank you for that help, Nick. And then let's see what else. One other thing I was going to tell you. The heck was the other one?
President Preiner,
Yes.
Manager Waller, if you're referring to the other comment in the meeting, I think it was Highway 244 and maybe
Yes.
that was the item.
He was interested in 244 and that, and what else was going on in that area there. And that was Karwoski, and but I thought it went pretty well, Nick. I really did. That is all positive. I was just trying to think of the other thing I attended. I didn't attend the MAUD meeting that day because I got caught in a snowstorm, I believe. I was down in southern Washington County, and boy, that took a long time to come home after the meeting. There were cars everywhere. So and they weren't on the road. That's a lot of them. So anyways, thank you. That's all I have to report, I believe.
So,
Manager Weiner?
Oh, wait a minute, I forgot. I remember what it is now, Madam President. I inspected ditch number 2 section that has been cleaned up between County Road 4 and Highway 61. Nice job. I only did it from the road. I didn't get in and walk, but nice looking from both the east end and the west end. Very nice job. So compliments to Ashley for that, please. And the contractors. Thank you. Now, I am done.
Okay.
Madam President, last time I had announced that I was going to attend the Bald Eagle Area Association meeting, and it turns out that they, because of COVID, they limited the meeting attendance to just people on the board. So I submitted a statement with the help of Nick Tomzek and Beth Carino. All the things we've done for them, and we've done a lot of things for them in the last couple of years. Very impressive. Thank you for that. And also, we're able to advise them in advance so they could plan on it, that we would not, that they would need to come up with money from the association for curly leaf control, since we no longer will have the water management district funding. The second thing I want to say is that you now have a copy of what I sent to Washington County asking for permission to appear before them on the 17th of November. I've received an email from Kevin Corbett, who acknowledges receipt of our request and stated that he would be talking to the chairman and he would get back to me, and I will let you know as soon as I hear something.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
all I have.
Marcy?
I have nothing today. Thank you.
Manager Wageman?
I have nothing.
And I think I have nothing. So with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Manager
Second.
Wagaman?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Manager Waller?
Aye.
Yes.
Sorry. Manager Winan?
Yes.
Manager Bradley?
Yep.
Manager Wageman?
Yes.
And Manager Priner, yes. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Say, Teresa, please be sure to print that. Thank you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.